Warning, spoilers for Cube, Cube² Hypercube, and Cube². Sound quality in the video isn't good. I did my best to fix it, but avoid headphones still.
Cube is a sci-fi horror movie from 1997 that nowadays is considered by many to be a cult classic of the horror genre. Much more forgotten are the sequel, Hypercube, and the prequel, Cube². I haven't forgotten them, so welcome to Vanessa Jupiter's sitting room. Today we are answering the question, what are cubes? Part 1. Quick rundown of the plot. Hypercube, and Cube² all follow the structure of people waking up and finding out that they are inexplicably inside a cube-shaped room that has 6 doors, one on each wall, ceiling, and floor. These cubes form a larger cube. In some of the rooms, there are traps that kill the people in the cube. The third movie not only focuses on the people inside the cube, but it also focuses on 2 men overlooking people who were trapped inside the cube. I will talk about more specific plot details as we move along. Part 2. Is it the government? In both the first and the second movie, the first theory proposed by the characters in the universe is that they are in some type of prison, that they are being punished for some reason by the government. The character in the first movie to propose the theory is called Holloway. She is a doctor. Holloway specifically says that the only people that would have enough money to build something like the cube is the military-industrial complex. Through that lens, we can easily create an allegory for the Cube movies that say that prisons are bad. The cube is basically just like prisons. You are isolated from the rest of society, you are put in a cell in a place where you cannot escape. There's deathly risk just around the corner. Part 3. Society is bad. One of the things of note in the Cube trilogy is that very often the conflict between the characters comes from nothing. They just argue with each other because they are stressed. They don't really open up to each other, which means that they don't really trust each other, and the problems that they have are all the more exacerbated because they don't know how to create a community among the people who have been trapped within the cube. In the first movie, there is a clear hierarchy that is formed, with Quentin, the cop, being right at the top. Quentin has been put on the role of leader of the team by himself. He is very much a manly man, and he behaves like he should be the leader because this is what society has told him as a man, as a cop that he is. There is also the uncomfortable fact that he's the only brown character in Cube. He also has a massive face heel turn that comes completely out of nowhere, where he kills Holloway just because he decided now to be completely evil. This hierarchy is very much framed as bad. Maybe if they were all on equal footing, things could have worked. Let's jump back to the third movie. Now, not only do we have the people inside the cube, but we have one step above. The people outside the cube who are looking into the people at the cube. And there are the people who are the higher-ups, or up above, the bosses of the people overlooking the people inside the cube. And even those people are very clearly not the very top. They are still subordinate to someone else. So there is a very clear idea of a hierarchy. Cube² takes a lot of the themes, a lot of the imagery from the first Cube movie, and exacerbates them in the most obvious way possible. Part 4. Is it God? Maybe Cube is not simply a prison. Maybe Cube is hell. This is something that is literally proposed by one of the characters in movie 2, Hypercube. Movie 3 gives us so much more. Cube² has the characters about to take their meal, and they literally stop and say, "No, we need to pray first. Cube² has files on the sins of the characters. There is constant reference all throughout movies 1 and 3 of a higher power, something looking over everybody. Movie 3 constantly refers to up above, someone who is looking over them, someone looking over us. Part 5. Do you believe in God? That scene from Cube². Dodds and Wynn are the two characters who are looking over the people inside the cube in Cube². They hear that someone is at the last room in the cube where they might be able to leave. So there's an operation that needs to take place. Dodds pulls out a machine. Dodds picks up a microphone and says, "State your name." The man states his name. He is chained to the floor, and then Dodds asks, "Do you believe in God?" To which this character answers, "What kind of God would allow this to happen? No, I don't." So Dodds presses one of two buttons. One says yes, one says no. Dodds presses no. This man, who just said that he doesn't believe in God, is put on fire. This scene does two things for the Cube universe. Number one, it makes the theme of God and religion more explicit than it ever had been up until this point. And number two, it confirms that God is indeed not who created the cube. After this point, we're introduced to the big villain of Cube². His name is Jax, and he is one step above Dodds and Wynn. Jax very much fears God, but he also fails. The system fails. When I say that Cube² makes a lot of the themes from Cube more explicit, I also mean to say that Cube² makes various different interpretations from Cube become impossible. After that scene from Cube², what we see is Jax talking about how the people who have been put inside the cube from Cube² are political enemies. The main character within the cube is called Brains, and she is a known activist. The government is using of religion to make people fear God and therefore obey the government. This is how God is used as a theme within the Cube movies. From this point on, it's not an allegory so much anymore, because it becomes so explicit. So, no, it's not God. Yes, it is the government. This has been answered. Allegory explained. Nothing else to discuss, right? Well, part 6. Let me try to explain Hypercube. Up until now, I have very briefly touched on Hypercube, the second movie in the series. I have talked quite a bit about the first one, which I'm going to come back to. I have talked a lot about the third one. What about the second one? Like, the second one needs to have something within it as well, right? Let me try to explain the plot of Hypercube. This time, the traps actually go from one room to another because they are all kind of like things that can move through walls. We have our cast of characters. They all wake up in the cube as usual, and they all congregate at some point. They see a couple of traps. One or two of them die. We find out who they are. We find out that they all had some type of relation to the creation of this cube. Next thing you know, you look at the clock and at the running time, and it's already been 1 hour and 10 minutes that we've been watching this movie, and you wonder, has Hypercube changed my perception of time? Have I lost touch with reality? How that 1 hour and 10 minutes go by, nothing happened. It's badly acted. There is this character called Sasha. She's a blind teenager. She looks like a teenager. She's revealed to be evil. Oh, look, it's another brown character being revealed to be evil halfway through a movie. After 1 hour and 10 minutes of basically nothing, of people introducing themselves and running into a couple of traps, what happens is that one of the characters who was just evil, he's been evil all along. He threatens to kill people for no reason at all. He starts eating the others, and the first person that he eats is another man, and I see cannibalism in film as usually kind of a sexual metaphor. So maybe Hypercube is the most queer of all three Cube movies. They're alternate universes, so he keeps on meeting the same guy over and over again and eating him over and over again. And I have tried to wrap my mind around what that could possibly mean, and I honestly don't know. It adds very little. It just makes the character who was already evil and threatening to kill people all the time to be even more evil and maybe gay, which is good. I love it. But there's also this sex scene where two of the characters just meet in one of the rooms and they start having sex, and then the gravity stops existing, so they start floating in the middle of the room, and then time speeds up. They age very fast and they become decomposed bodies hugging each other in mid-air because there's no gravity anymore. Within Hypercube, the big solution at the end was that there was a specific time where the cube would self-detonate. Put a pin in Hypercube will self-detonate. We'll come back to that. So the main character, Kate, she jumps into one of the hatches that leads downstairs, and the fact that she jumped while the cube was self-detonating led her to outside of the cube. But if time is going differently in the different rooms within the cube, doesn't that mean that there's no such a thing as a specific time where she could jump? Or does the cube self-detonate at infinite times and infinite moments because there are alternate realities within the cube? So wouldn't that mean that all of them would eventually become aware of this possibility and all of them would eventually manage to leave the cube? And Kate, the main character of the movie, in the very last scene when she meets the government, she has a stick that she stole from Sasha that supposedly gives the answer to something that they were looking for, because Sasha is the person who created the cube. So Kate was working for the government all along, and did she know that she was working for them all along? Did she know that she had a mission, or was she brainwashed to forget it while she was inside the cube, but also wired to know to steal the stick and then bring it to the people, and then she's shot? The twist raises so much more questions than answers, and none of it made sense before. So the entire experience of watching Hypercube is just a big what? And I have tried quite hard to figure out themes for Hypercube, and I really don't understand. And this makes me sit here and wonder, does anything have meaning? Part 7. Is life meaningless? The opening shot of Hypercube is of all of the people that we are about to meet inside in plastic bags on operating tables. It is a shot that would indicate that these people, maybe all people, are nothing but bodies. Cube, the first movie, has a theme of the meaningless of life. Worth, the real protagonist of the story, loses all hope very fast. Other characters tell him that he has opened their eyes. Worth refers to himself as the poison, the person who gives knowledge. And worth is pure existential dread. Nothing that we do has actual meaning. Nothing that we do can actually change the way that things are structured. The best that we can do is survive. Worth has no reason to continue living. He has found meaning within the cube by wanting to make the others get out. But by the ending of the story, one of them gets out, and it's unclear what happens to him after that point. Worth also has died. Worth found meaning within desperate circumstances, but in the end, it was all for nothing. It is impossible to watch Cube and come out of it thinking that we have good solutions, that society is good, actually. No, society is bad, hierarchy is bad, the governments are bad, God is bad. The real allegory in the first Cube movie is not God or the government, it's real life. It's us just trying to make sense out of the situation where we are and not managing to. It is telling that Cube² decided to explore so many of the themes of the first movie and go deep into them, but it left the existential dread out. Cube², by explaining everything, removed the existential dread from the Cube franchise completely. We just need to take down the government and everything will work. It's a difficult message, but it's a much easier pill to swallow than life not having any meaning, us not having a reason to be here, and us not having a real way to get out. Part 8. Let's talk about disability representation within Cube. A character that I have left completely out so far is the autistic character from the first Cube movie. His name is Kaizen. He's never named autistic in universe, but he is coded autistic in the most stereotypical way. He's also literally compared to a computer in universe because he can do like math in his brain very fast. He's obviously a super genius, which is just such a tired stereotype of autistic people. And by basically all of the other characters except for Holloway, he is seen as merely a nuisance. We have such a little sense of who Kaizen even is. Cube² has Sasha, who is the big villain of the movie. She's a blind girl who is played by a non-blind actress, which is already bad, already tired, already upsetting. Then it's made all the much worse because her second line in the movie is her dropping an R word. And the first movie also has people referring to Kaizen with the R slur. The good characters. It took all the way to Cube² for someone to actually use the R word yet again, but then finally someone in universe calling them out. Disabled representation is bad in most media, sure. It's very bad in horror movies. I think that we should do better, and this is my little segment being like, hey, the Cube trilogy is problematic in the context of disability issues. Part 9. A system that we all build together or something. Cube and Hypercube both have a bunch of characters who worked in some way or another in the construction of the cubes. Cube² has people who are still working, operating the cube. This implies that we have all helped building society, that we are in a hell of our own making, that we, or at least some of us, are at fault for being in the circumstances that we are in. This is the one theme that Hypercube actually succeeds in doing, because all of the characters actually have something to do with the cube that they are in. They clearly hate the circumstances that they are in, which also means that they are powerless against the system that they can do nothing but uphold, as if the only option to exist in the cube universe is to work in some capacity for the cube. In the third movie, that is slightly more poignant, I would say, because all of them are working for the cube. This is portrayed as very much not a choice. Dodds and Win are both very unhappy workers with the cube. We see the characters who work overlooking the cube eventually being put inside it, which means that you uphold a society that will eventually destroy you. Speaking of destroying you, the pin that we put on the self-detonation, it's time to bring it back. The cubes self-detonate by design. What does this remind me of? A society that we know cannot hold itself together. A type of system that is literally killing us. A type of system that is literally destroying the environment where we are in, and that will eventually detonate the entire environment no matter what we do, because that's how it was designed to work. The Cube trilogy might actually be anti-capitalist. Part 10. Let's dismantle capitalism. As I have already touched on, Hypercube, the second movie in the trilogy, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's very difficult to untangle anything that happens within it, right? But one of the things that is very heavily implied is that the people who have built this cube are not actually the government. They are just a very big corporation that works independently of the government. What if we run with this? What if, instead of placing the government as the big allegory that is revealed in movie 3, we say for 1 second here that it's actually a corporation that holds a lot more power than the government because of the free market, because corporations can grow so big that they can overtake the government. Okay, this is where we are. I don't think it's true for Cube², but let's pretend that this is true of the universe. The Cube universe is a universe where corporations hold so much power that they can actually build structures that imprison and kill people inside of them. Do we need to imagine that this is the case, or do we already live in a society where that is the case? Maybe all of this was a bad idea. Maybe we shouldn't be allowing corporations to hold that much power. By the ending of Cube², we see Reigns, the main character who was trapped inside the cube, becoming a revolutionary. Maybe this is the only way for us to move forward, is for us to dismantle capitalism. It's only possible to try to imagine something better. There's very little we can do against the cube. Maybe there's nothing we can do against the cube. But there's power in dreaming, and there's power in believing in a better place. The cube was designed to detonate the place where it's in. So what we need to do is that we need to destroy the cube before it destroys everything. The rules have never been disclosed to the people. We just woke up inside the cube. We just came to the cube without knowing what it was, without consent. And we don't know what the rules are. We don't know how to get out. We don't know how to win. And maybe there is no way of winning. because the rules keep on changing. So maybe the cube is unfair and there's no way of making the cube fair. The Cube trilogy gives us a lot of existential dread. The Cube trilogy gives us a lot of ideas of how the government might be using God in order to control us. But in the end of the day, what the Cube trilogy also tells us is that capitalism will self-destruct and that it cannot be fair and that it is a system that needs to be destroyed. We need to destroy the cube before it kills all of us. Thank you. So this has been quite a difficult video to write. I actually chose to talk about the Cube trilogy because I had like vague positive memories associated to the Cube trilogy, but I didn't really remember Hypercube and Cube². And I was like, you know what? People never talk about Hypercube and Cube². I'll talk about this because I seem to be one of the only people who is actually passionate about the entire trilogy. After rewatching the movies, I saw myself kind of obligated to myself to make a deeper analysis than I would have expected myself to do. I hope you enjoyed it. Love, Vanessa Jupiter.